Welcome to Sykes, the Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast, your regular dose of pharmacy CPA advice to fuel your bottom line, featuring pharmacists, key vendors, and other innovators.
Your checks, yes, you can call me, because we the best, Sykes and Company. We the best, Sykes and Company. Your accounting is a mess, there's no need for you to stress. Go online and request from the best. We the best, Sykes and Company. We the best, Sykes and Company, yes.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Sykes Pharmacy Bottom Line Podcast. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Doug Hoey from NCPA, CEO of NCPA. That's the National Community Pharmacists Association. Doug, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure to be on the show. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Doug, it's great for you to be with us today. I'm Ollin Sykes, and this is Bonnie Bond, even though it says 007. We're just glad to have Doug with us today. I think I saw somewhere this is our 50th podcast anniversary recording, Bonnie. Did I see that correctly?
It is, and that's why we wanted Doug on the
Absolutely.
big event.
Absolutely. So, Doug, we do these constant.
Is that 50th?
I think that's right. I think
50th anniversary of podcasting. That's right. But we're great to have you with you, and I'm just going to plow right into obviously the topic of the day. And, you know, we know Congress is in a state of total disarray right now going into the election. We know you guys have been working your rear ends off on the PBM reform situation. We're seeing great things, it looks like, that are taking place in various states. And, Doug, we appreciate everything you and the NCPA is doing. Give us the latest on where things stand, because I know that's what's on everybody's minds.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Ollin, for that, and congratulations on the 50th podcast. You mentioned PBM reform, and that's exactly right, but to put even a finer point on it is payment reform. Obviously PBMs do all kinds of bad deeds, and we want those corrected in the name of truth, justice, and the American way. But even equally important and even more important is that payment reform for pharmacies is included in part of that PBM reform. So where we're focused, NCPA doesn't negotiate contracts. We're not a PSAO. That's not our role. Where we can have influence are on some of the government programs. Medicare, Medicaid. Medicaid's 15% of the average pharmacy's business. Medicare is 36% of the average pharmacy's business. So that's where we really have focused our payment reform efforts. Medicaid reform is in play in Congress, federal legislation, which would reform Medicaid in all 50 states so that pharmacies would be paid based on a benchmark, and that benchmark is likely to be NADAC, plus a dispensing fee decided by your state. Now, about a third of the states have already, just on their own, passed their own legislation. And what we've heard from members, they like that NADAC plus a predictable, transparent, fair dispensing fee.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah, we get that. So, I mean, it's not going to make anyone rich, but it's predictable, it's transparent, and so far it's been fair. Usually what I've seen from the 14 states that have passed it, that represent about 140 million people in those 14 states, it's been between about $9.50, $10, and $12, which for most pharmacies, again, they're not going to get rich off of that, but they can make a living and keep on serving patients, helping their communities, and be able to pay their employees. So that's Medicaid. That's past the House of Representatives status. It's past the House. We need the Senate to take it up for a vote. We think if the Senate passes it, that the president will sign it. But it got stuck in March, where Senator Schumer, who is the majority leader in the Senate, he decides what comes up for a vote and what doesn't. He decided not to bring it up for a vote. The legislation itself, it doesn't mean he's a PBM lover or a pharmacy hater necessarily. We will test him on that over the next 6 months or so. But it does mean that the legislation was tied in with other things. So it wasn't just a pure pharmacy piece of legislation. There's other stuff mixed in with it, like a lot of bills. And we're told Senator Schumer didn't like some of the other stuff that was in it. So there's a lot of effort right now, and we can get into that if you'd like, on encouraging Senator Schumer and the Senate to take it up for a vote between now and the time Congress ends. Medicare, 36% of the average pharmacy's business. That's gone through all the committees. It goes through, several committees. Almost unanimously, Medicare payment reform is positioned in the House and the Senate to be voted on. It has not been voted on in either. What that legislation would do would require PBMs to offer reasonable and relevant contracts. Reasonable and relevant. So my first question when my team told me this was, who decides what's reasonable and relevant? Because I know if the PBM's deciding what's reasonable and relevant, it's not going to be reasonable and relevant.
Anything, right?
So there's actually funding in this bill that requires someone, an entity through CMS, which makes me a little nervous, but there is an entity that determines reasonable and relevant, and that entity would have to answer to members of Congress, where we think we do have some champions out there who do care that pharmacies are in business, that do care that patients are served, that do care that a taxpayer-funded Medicare program is not stifling, choking, and killing small businesses. So we do think that having an arbiter to decide reasonable and relevant will result in something that actually might be reasonable and relevant.
Yeah. What do you think? What's your outside guess to the chances of getting that Medicare payment reform through, like the Medicaid situation? You think it's going to be held up in the House for any particular reason?
I think where it could be held up in the House is you've got some, we'll say, you've got the outliers. You've got the ultra conservatives, you've got the ultra liberals, and they get to be so far extreme on either side that they almost come and meet in them. They almost come and join each other for extreme views, which is sort of counterintuitive. The ultra conservatives might say, no, we don't like reasonable and relevant because that's the government interfering with the free market. Well, the problem with that view is that it is not a free market. It's not a normal functioning market because PBMs have all of the leverage. It's not a normal, buyer seller type of relationship where you're giving and taking, and you give, the seller takes. I mean, it's not a functioning marketplace. So that's kind of that could be their flawed view. And on the ultra liberal side, they could say, well, it doesn't go far enough. We need more government control than having, a marketplace decide reasonable and relevant. I do think there's enough normal people in between, I'll say normal people by my standards, that reasonable people that would say, no, this reasonable and relevant, this is just the right amount of marketplace with a little bit of government oversight, because we need a referee in here to determine reasonable and relevant. So I think it's got a shot. Medicaid has a better shot. Medicaid has been scored, which means that the accounting, the actuarials, and by the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, have said that this Medicaid legislation would save taxpayers over $1 billion. The Medicare reform has not been scored. That's not true. The estimates are that it would be budget neutral. That it would be budget neutral. So that helps it a lot. That it's not going to cost taxpayers anything. So I think it's got a shot. Medicaid has a stronger shot. We're going to be pushing on both of them because we need them both. Get them both.
Oh boy, do we ever? 50%. Do we ever?
Yeah, we sure do.
And those 14 states that you were mentioning on the Medicaid front, is Michigan one of those already?
If it is, it's one of the newer ones. You've got big states like California, New York. Alabama was the first state.
Yeah.
Georgia, another big population state. If Michigan passed it, it's been very, very recent.
Okay. All right. Because I've just heard some of our clients talk about the Medicaid NADAC pricing situation. I was thinking it was Michigan that I heard that talked about the other day.
They
Yeah.
may have. I don't have all
Yeah.
14 memorized, but
But if it is, I do know they like it, and they think it's a fair situation.
yeah, you get into some people with a lot of high dollar drugs, specialty pharmacies.
Yeah.
They might not like it so much, but the average pharmacy doing 80 or 90% of their prescriptions generics, a lot of lisinoprils, metformins, levothyroxines, etc., atorvastatins, they should benefit from this.
Yeah. And Doug, what do you think? Of course, all this has led to the pharmacy desert situation that we're all dealing with, and with the number of pharmacies that since the first of the year have bitten the dust for one reason or another. We've obviously dealing with a lot of transitions here, but yet at the same time, we've got others that are just doing exceptionally well. In fact, I just got off a call with the South Carolina pharmacists, and they're just doing exceptionally well, and they're doing everything they need to be doing on the clinical side. I know this NCPA has just worked really hard, especially through the ownership workshop program and other long-term care programs that you guys are doing. Is there anything further we can be doing or pushing to help bring awareness to the public about all this is taking place? It's really hurting the public. And when you add the specialty GLP-1 situation out there, that's just kind of hit all these pharmacies, and so many pharmacies now are not either carrying it or sending them off to larger big boxes to fill them. There's just so many issues there on that front that how in the world are you dealing with that day by day?
Well, yeah,
That's a loaded question, Ollin.
Yeah.
Boy, it is.
Well, it can be overwhelming, but at the same time, someone in the store level, that's who the question is better suited for. How are they dealing with? I mean, we are trying to help them in so many different ways. The GLPs has had a huge impact. I think to the start of your question, as far as consumers, patients, and we do think that that group is a key constituency to try to get our issues over the finish line. We know the pharmacies, our NCPA members have done an amazing job responding to our grassroots calls for actions. They sent over 20,000 messages. Our members, independent pharmacists, sent over 20,000 messages to Congress in the first 3 or 4 months of this calendar year. When we had our fly-in in mid-April, we had over 300 meetings, and I think in every one of those meetings, the meeting would start with, "I've heard you. I know what a PBM is. You don't have to explain it to me." Yep. And so it's been effective from that standpoint. I think we need to turn up the heat, though.
Yeah.
And turning up the heat, one way to do it, a member of Congress, their number one objective is to get reelected. I mean, as soon as they get elected on November 5th or whatever day it is, they start planning for their reelection campaign. So that's their number one. So hearing from voters, a lot of voters, obviously pharmacies are voters and their staff are voters, but hearing from a lot of voters, we hope will put more pressure on them. We are in the midst. We'll be announcing this week the launch of a campaign we're calling Finish the Fight. The Finish the Fight campaign. It will go to pharmacies, and there will be a lot of collateral that we think our pharmacies are going to like, and it's going to resonate with them. But ideally, we're trying to get those materials in front of consumers, patients, and to get patients and consumers to reach out to Congress. There will be, the collateral will be, we believe, memorable. We hope it's a little gross and funny, so that someone can't not think about it or can't unsee it. And it will play in, we'll be sending it to pharmacies and ask pharmacies to put it in front of their consumers and for their patients. We'll have QR codes for them to give to their patients, to send them right to websites. We'll have messaging to consumers. So we'll have ads on, we'll do some buys on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. So we're covering pretty much everyone on the political spectrum from left to right and sort of in between. And we'll also be doing other things. And I don't want to kind of reveal everything because sometimes we can't control who listens to this.
Exactly.
But we'll be doing other things to activate consumers and patients to get them to encourage them and hopefully get them to call their members of Congress. And we'll be focused in certain states too. And you can guess some of those states that we'll be focused on to really encourage those members of Congress.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great idea because obviously the consumers are feeling the pinch. The consumers are being educated by the pharmacists out there on the front lines. And if we can get the consumers to do the same thing, maybe the pharmacists done the first few months of this year to bring awareness, that would certainly add to the process without question about that.
Can I add just Ollin and Bonnie?
Sure.
So we hired a PR firm to do this. Our NCPA board has dipped into a significant dip into our reserves to fund this. When we talked about it as an NCPA board, we said this may or may not push it over the finish line, but we don't want to be looking back on January 1st, 2025 and saying coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Exactly.
What if we had just done this? So we, leaving it all on the field. One of the things in this PR firm, and I just got it yesterday, was they surveyed 1,000 consumers. And what I'm about to say is an important message for our pharmacists, our pharmacy members to hear. It's not always the most appetizing thing to hear. This PR firm asked consumers, again, 1,000 consumers, is it important to you that independent pharmacies are getting hurt by PBMs? They phrased it more, better than that. But yeah, it's really important to consumers that independent pharmacies are going out of business by PBMs. So that's good to know. That's heartening. However, the number one issue for consumers is the price of the drug. That outweighs everything. Because that was another question is, kind of what's your number one thing? And it's the price of the drugs. So this campaign is not going, it's okay to talk about PBMs causing pharmacies to go out of business. We obviously don't want to ignore that. That's important. But its number one theme is PBMs are causing your drugs to cost more.
Yep.
PBMs make you pay more for your drugs, which is 100% true.
Yep.
But that's the emphasis. It's not help your small business. I mean, we want people to help the small business. We are concerned. Of course, we're very concerned about independent pharmacies going out of business. But from a consumer standpoint, they care most about their pocketbook. They care about their pharmacy, but they care most about their pocketbook. And that's what this campaign is going to emphasize.
I think it's a fabulous idea. And I agree with the board's decision to do whatever you can, because I think you got a great opportunity now with the awareness that's growing ever more so with the public about the PBMs and with what's taking place in the industry. I applaud you guys for making that move. I really do.
And like Ollin mentioned, we do still see a lot of stores that are doing fabulous. But Doug, what kind of advice would you give to some of the independents out there that are struggling at this point? I mean, they're kind of like, what can I do?
Yeah, if they have not gone through sort of the checklist of things that might be obvious, but maybe not obvious. I mean, for you guys, I mean, there's probably a not a literal, maybe even a literal checklist, like, have you talked to your wholesaler? Have you talked to your buying group? Have you looked at your PSAO contracts? What kind of, your inventory turnover? Have you looked at your staffing? Are there some, staffing changes you could make that would, still allow you to provide services? Do you haven't charged for delivery for your entire history of business. Everyone else in the world charges for delivery now. Grubhub, DoorDash. Yeah. Consumers are used to it. In fact, they're probably shocked when they're not charged. And I know, I mean, I was a long time ago in the pharmacy and we charged for delivery, 30 years ago, 25 years ago when I was practicing. People paid it. It was, $2, $2.50, right, something like that. It wasn't a lot. But things that you've given away for free, are there things do you need to start charging for those things, or do you need to stop giving them away for free?
Yeah.
I think some of the big things, personnel, talking to your wholesaler, talking to your buying group, looking at your PSAO contracts, those would be probably some of the big areas I would look at first. Operating hours, do you need to be open till 8 o'clock on Saturday? No, close at 5.
Do they need to be open on Saturday afternoon? I mean,
Right.
it's amazing the number of things that you've just mentioned and then some that many pharmacists don't even look at or recognize that the impact that these things have on the key performance indicators of these pharmacies. And we're constantly pushing these pharmacists to review all these things that move the needle, like payroll, like how well are you buying? What is your I know you've been with this buying group forever and ever and ever, but you need to be reviewing your contracts and looking at what other options there are. Do you need to be involved in clinical services? Do you need to be looking at some of the things that CPESN is working on in conjunction with NCPA, things of this nature? It's just, there's so many things out there that sometimes they just feel so overwhelmed they don't have time to do it. But frankly, they don't have an opportunity not to, because it means survival in many of these cases.
You're exactly right, and I almost turned the question back to you guys, and you just mentioned it because you see the books of these pharmacies, and so what would be your top 5 things that you would say, hey, if you could just look at 5 things, these are the 5 things that most often is going to move the needle the most.
How well you buy is huge.
How well you buy is a single number 1 item. Payroll is number 2.
Reconciling receivables, they got to know.
Oh my Lord!
If they've been
we
paid.
could just get pharmacies to reconcile and work with their third-party reconciliation companies and deal with perpetual inventories and do cycle counts periodically to look at the cash that's sitting on their shelves and look at some of their rent contracts they're paying per square footage. It's just amazing the things that can move the needle that we see out there, Doug, that just so many of them are not doing. And you're right. I mean, we're looking at those balance sheets first and foremost because everything on that balance sheet affects the P&L. And we're trying to make sure that they're optimizing their tax situations, which can mean nothing but cash coming into the business properly handled. But it's a never-ending process of trying to work with these guys and ladies to bring profitability and cash flow to these businesses. And
obviously, those that are diversifying their revenue and finding other ways other than just filling scripts it's definitely a positive.
No question about that. And there's so many new things out there. Infusion's a big thing we're seeing in today's marketplace. Non-sterile compounding done right is big. Long-term care at home, huge issue. Just on the call with somebody, just looking at that and they've already determined that there's a $10,000 a month incremental gross profit that they can pick up from just moving to that program. I mean, my goodness, why haven't you already done it? I mean, it's just incredible, the lack of movement in some pharmacies. And it's just those things that make us beat our head against that brick wall behind me sometimes.
Well, there's still a lot of stores that haven't gotten into compliance and adherence and packaging and things like that. And so we're definitely, pushing people to do that if they're not already. But it makes a big difference.
You mentioned just it can be overwhelming. And so I can appreciate that. I mean, there's just so many things to do. So, I mean, I guess for that, I would say the adage of, eating the elephant one bite at a time, rather than try to do all 5 things. This month I'm going to focus on if it's buying, or I'm going to focus on my personnel, and just, again, to do that one step at a time. NCPA is going to be launching a program, and I think you guys are aware of this.
Yes.
The core
program. Yeah, we're involved with that. Yeah.
Yes. So that's an effort for the type of owners we're talking about, who both the kind who are overwhelmed and also the overachievers, but who want to do even better. But it's for someone for personal leadership, for team leadership, and importantly, the things we're talking about today, the nuts and bolts operations of your business, the marketing, but the financial nuts and
the
bolts.
financial management part is the part we're going to be playing in that. You're absolutely right. It's a great program you guys have put together, and it's just now launching. And we wish it the most success with that, and happy to participate with that. No question about that.
I mean, we hate to toot our own horn, but whoever does it, you have to have up-to-date real-time numbers in your financials to know how your pharmacy is even operating, to make the changes that you're mentioning. You don't know if your payroll's too high unless you have that information and it's correct.
That's right. Yeah, you need it relative
it's
to
so
what?
important. Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, Doug, we know you're a busy guy and you got a lot going on. We didn't want to take too much of your time, and certainly appreciate you being with us this short period of time this morning and giving us some insights here. And happy that you've been a part of this podcast, and I'm sure it'll be viewed by a fair number of pharmacists that we'll push it out to. So we look forward to seeing you not too distant future here. We're looking forward to participating in the ownership workshop next weekend. This is mid-June 2024. We're doing this, but we have the ownership workshop in New Orleans next weekend. Looking forward to participating in that because it's amazing still the number of startups and transitions that we're dealing with even in today's market. And there's just folks out there eager to learn. And you guys have provided the resources for many, many years and decades to help them. And we just thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's core to us. McKesson's a sponsor of that, so we thank them for that. Mm-hmm. And we'll see you all also in Columbus in
Absolutely.
October. That's our annual meeting. First time in Ohio in my history at NCPA, which is getting to be pretty long, and first time in Columbus ever. So we're looking forward to seeing you and all the listeners there at the end of October.
Well, good. We look forward to being there. And again, we appreciate your time today, and we appreciate all your efforts of you and the board and everyone that works at NCPA. Everybody that we work with there is always so very helpful, knowledgeable, and we just appreciate everything that's being done.
We're here for independent pharmacy. Congratulations on your 50th podcast.